Welcome to our discussion on services, which is chapter 12 in Marketing 2. Services make up a huge part of the economy. If we think about our economy today is a service-based economy, and services are just intangible products that are sold throughout. The key thing with a service that distinguishes it from any other type of product is that degree of intangibility. We can't touch it, we can't see it, we can't feel it, but it is very, very useful to us. So it brings with it a whole bunch of concerns. We can't do any of those assessment things that we normally do on a raw product, which makes it very difficult to buy. If we think about services from a theoretical point of view, scholars have identified four major aspects that differentiate service from anything else. First of all, intangible, as we just mentioned, but there are also things that deal with the inconsistency issue that services bring. Because services are used, provided and consumed at the same time, there's some inconsistency in service. For example, if a service is provided today, will it be as good as the one provided tomorrow? Skiing, for example. Let's assume you're going skiing, downhill skiing. It's a beautiful day, you go skiing on the first day, great. The next day you go skiing, it's raining. Now, the service provider can't change that, can't affect that, but will your service experience be different? Hence the term inconsistent. It's very difficult. Unlike a product where you're producing, let's say, for example, this eraser. This eraser can be produced in the millions almost identically. It's hard to present services identically. In order to do that, a lot of companies, in order to solve this inconsistency problems, what a lot of companies do is extensive training that ensures that if people are delivering the service, it's relatively consistent, or they mechanize the service delivery. So as a result, the machine or the computer or the website or whatever is consistent time after time after time. So those are some methods that are used to solve that inconsistency problem. The third factor that we look at is this issue of inseparability. Inseparability means that services come with a number of parts. Let's say, for example, you're going to fly on an airplane. You have to go to the airport, you have to get on the plane, you have to collect your luggage, you have to get a taxi. There's a number of things that flow out of that. Either one of those can go wrong. Let's assume you can't get a taxi cab at the end of your flight. Will that affect your overall view of the whole experience? Yes, it will. But has your whole experience been bad? No, it hasn't. But it taints the whole experience. So this inseparability means that services have this unique problem that exists where if one aspect of the service goes bad, it could spoil the rest. We also have this concept of inventory in services, in the sense that unlike raw products that you can put on a shelf, you can't put services on a shelf. They're delivered at the same time they are produced. So, as a result, you can't store them. If you can't store them, that means you need to build your capacity such that you can meet any possible need. Let's take, for example, the electric power company. You're producing power. You need to have a generating capacity that meets the coldest day of the year. Even though that only happens once, you have to build your capacity of your system to meet that one day. This is a form of inventory. Or a bus. You can imagine a bus that would hold about 50 people. There's only one person riding on it at a given point in time. So that means there's 49 empty spaces. Do you stop the bus? No. The bus keeps going. But there's inventory and wasted seats. And these wasted seats cost money. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of power to affect inventory, but you do see a lot of companies trying to. For example, airlines or bus lines will offer discounts on seats in order to get them filled up. So this means that you can buy a cheap airline ticket. And the reason you can buy a cheap airline seat is that at least the company are making some money. That seat's going to fly with or without your bum in it. The question is, can they make a little bit of money if you are there? And if they make a little bit, that adds to the bottom line. So that's how they resolve the inventory issue. So let's take a look at this concept of the service continuum. Services, as I've mentioned before in the previous chapters, are not necessarily pure. In other words, all service. There's obviously a service component plus a tangible product component. So you're going to a restaurant, you're getting the meal, that's tangible. How the meal is provided to you, though, is the service. So there's some mix of service and an intangible product, or a tangible product, sorry. So the service continuum looks at different service provisions that are made that have certain degrees of tangibleness to it. So, for example, a video camera will be a very tangible product, whereas the video that comes out of the video camera is a very intangible product. But you need both in order to make it happen. So there's some middle ground. So you go to a restaurant, there's a certain degree of product, there's a certain degree of service. You go put road salt on a highway. There's a lot of product to it, but there's service as well. Someone has to spread the salt. So these sorts of things come into play in the service continuum. We can classify services too along the lines of who delivers them. We could think about, well, it's provided by people or provided by equipment. So a Coke machine versus someone selling a Coke. Can provide it for profit or not for profit. A store that makes money versus a hospital, let's say, for example. Or provided by government or non-government. We could look at it in that way. We can also look at how we evaluate the service. How can we evaluate something we can't touch or can't see? Normally we go on the power of word of mouth. Someone else's experience before is we're going to look to them and say, how did you find it? That's what's called experience qualities. We have to experience it. We also have certain factors that come into play that help services. So, for example, you go to a doctor, the very fact that he or she has doctor on the front of their name as a title gives us a certain degree of comfort, the fact that they have passed certain requirements in order to do that. So these are called credence qualities. So certain services have credence. So, for example, if it has an ISO stamp on it for quality control or these sorts of things, it lends credence to the provider of the service, or a brand name that we're familiar with as opposed to an unfamiliar name. In terms of when services are provided, we have an expectation of what we want versus what we get. This what we want versus what we get. We can look at the difference between the two levels and find the gap between what we got and what we wanted. This is called a gap analysis. We want, and when we're providing services, we want a minimal gap between who's providing it and what's provided. Using the gap analysis, we can find out what went wrong with services and use it to improve. One of the ways that improvement is done is through a contact audit, which looks at gap analysis at various points of contact between the customer and the service provider. So we can do that. We can follow up. It's like a flow chart of a customer comes, a customer has this interaction, this interaction, this interaction. Then we say, how much of a difference between what a customer would expect at that point in time and what the customer got exists, and why does it exist, and what can we do in order to make sure it doesn't exist? Finally, we look at these 8 unique features of services. And these are called the 8 P's of service. First of all, we look at the first 4 P's, which are standard: the product, the price, the promotion, and the place. All services have a given price. They have a given offering, the product, how they're promoted, how we provide them better, and the actual place where that service is provided, usually online, could be any number of things in terms of it. We also add another 4, the physical evidence. What physical tangibles come out of it? How does your hair look after a haircut, for example? The process, how is the service provided? Is it online? Is it easy to use, difficult to use, these sorts of things? The productivity, how is the capacity of that service managed? What do we do in terms of making sure that the load of the services is maintained, that we don't have too many staff, not enough staff, these sorts of things. And with all those factors in place, we can assess the quality of the service and manage it. So using those 8 P's, we can assess how the service can be improved and what aspects we need to improve. So that's that chapter. Thanks.